Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors consisting of some of the best tech leaders in the world, people you may have never heard of, but who in just an hour, you'll know their unfiltered career story. The bets they took, the decisions they made, where they failed, and the lessons that they learned along the way. Welcome to the What Makes You Tick podcast. Hello, I'm Tolu, aka the Podfather, and I'm the host of the What Makes You Tick podcast.
I don't have such a good name, but my name's Richard and I'm the MD of Tick Talent and we sponsor this podcast.
Maybe we should call you Tick Tick Boom. Maybe that
Tick,
should
tick,
be your
boom.
nickname. Tick
Oh,
Boom.
please. I love it. Who have we got on today then, Tolu?
So this week's episode is with Jeremy Keefe. What did you think of this episode listening back?
So, I absolutely loved it. And the reason is I've known Jeremy for a number of years. So he used to be a client of mine and he's just this incredible sales leader who's worked his way up over, he's gone through like the whole sort of big tech period during the 80s with some of the mega brands that exist in the marketplace today. And then worked his way up through many decades of incredible career advancement to be a CEO level person now. And I remember working with Jeremy. One of the things that really stuck in my brain was he was just such a good guy, such an honest guy, really passionate, incredibly open. What he says was absolutely 100% the truth. And he had this amazing gravitas. Some people walk into a room and they just own the room straight away. And Jeremy has that kind of presence. And I think a huge amount of respect. Everyone in the businesses that I worked with him in and in his businesses when they were our clients just absolutely love Jeremy. So I think there's going to be a lot of value that people get from him. What came across most for you, Tolu, from the conversation?
So I think for me, his people first approach, like when I asked him what makes him tick, his answer for me was like, okay, this is going to be a great episode because from right off the bat, he was saying some really good things. So I think that for me was really it. And then his just competitive nature where we did from this to this, from this to this million, from this to this, it's just like relentless winning. And I love that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So without further ado, let's roll the VT.
Jeremy, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
So this podcast is called What Makes You Tick. So we usually start out by saying, Jeremy, what makes you tick?
Quite a few things, actually, but I think from a business angle, what makes me tick, the people I work with, whether that's the people I'm working with or the people I'm selling to. I think it's important that I used to say this a lot in business. It's the people that work for me that get me up every day and get me driving to drive that success. So out of the people comes success. And I think we're all driven by being successful. That can mean success in many different ways. It can mean career, it can mean winning a deal, it can be turning a company around. There are many things, but people, I think, and the people you work with, and you spend a lot of time in work with people, are the ones that get me out of bed and are pivotal to my success.
What would you say has been your biggest people win in your career?
Probably the biggest one was I took over a French team when the company I was working for Polycom at the time, had been bought by private equity. We made 10% staff reductions across the world as private equity did. They came in and they said, first thing we're going to do, we're going to take 10% of cost out, which is pretty standard stuff. Yeah, and at the same time, I took on the French region and I went in there and they probably lost 15 people, something like that. They did lose quite a few people. And I looked at them and they were all down, depressed, couldn't get motivated to do anything. And I sat down and the sales manager in France is where it started from, who's my direct report. And I said, look, if you can't show a smiley, happy, emotional, free face, then your team can't follow you in that same way. And therefore, one of your sales managers, he had 3 sales managers, needs to do the same thing. And we need to bring the team back up. They were the second best performing region in the European marketplace for us after the UK. And I just said, guys, you've dropped. You're letting Iberia get ahead of you, which was tiny in terms of where that marketplace was. And just by working with those guys and making sure that from the management down, you were showing that life goes on. Yes, we've lost key people, friends, but life goes on. We're still here to do a job. and we can have more fun if we're all in this together. And just pulling people on a journey with me and the management team. And France started producing again, and it became the second best region again within a period of 3 to 4 months. And I think having dealt, as I made the point very early, I'm not English, I'm Welsh, so that obviously helps with the French relationships because we're all Celtic brothers together there. But I think that was probably the best experience I had of a team that was really on its knees and bringing them back up just by some basics. There's nothing there that's rocket science. It's basics, right? Of you lead from the front, you show that you're in for the fight and you're okay with everything going on around you, and it just filters down through the team.
Was that a case of fake it till you make it? So the guys almost had to put on a brave face for a little bit until they felt that? Or was what you did really make them feel that and then go out and show that?
No, I think it was genuine. I wasn't putting on a brave face at all. It was a realization that if they didn't do that, you'd end up, you work for American vendors, it could be anybody in the world actually. If your business is failing, you cut costs. And I think there was a realization that we didn't want to cut any more cost in the French region. We wanted to boost the French region and build it back up. But if they didn't come on that journey, and it was a business, it wasn't anything to do with putting on a brave face. It was a realization that we need to go and perform again. And that was the realization that made it work.
I love that because I feel sometimes it can be very hard in those restructure situations because people are genuinely hurting, they're genuinely struggling, and sometimes they may find it quite difficult to be able to go out there and say it's going to be okay, to go out there and have that positive energy. So I love that, something that you were able to really instill in them and they were able to go out and do that authentically.
Yeah, and put a smile on your face. And I think you can do it to the point you made earlier. Was that putting on a brave face? If you're putting on a brave face to a smiley face, it's a totally different look and feel. And I think if you do it with a smile on your face and you do it with conviction, people react. If you're putting on the brave face, I think people see through that. And I think it's
see through it.
Yeah, it's interesting where you get that, and it's everybody's on a journey, and part of my role as a VP of sales or as a CEO, CRO, you're taking people on that journey with you, and you've got to believe in that journey, and you need your management team to believe in that journey so you can bring people with you.
I love that. So you mentioned a few of the roles that you've done. I'd love to hear like an overview of your career, right from the beginning to what you're doing at the moment would be great.
This could take some time. A lot of, I qualified out of what is now a university, was a Institute of Higher Education with a diploma in computer science. Joined a very small business in Wales, driving in a little clapped out Escort, which broke down more on the motorway than it actually went on the motorway. Selling, training, supporting. Thought I'd find my fortune and moved to London, working for a software business that was focused on the catering industry, which was hard going because it was literally a software package that a catering business could go in and say, you're going to do these amount of covers of this amount of food and this type of food, and it would give you a shopping list and automate everything for you. Great concept, great idea, but was before its time really in the 80s in the marketplace. For some reason, and I know the reason, probably not for this session, but I joined a very good friend of mine selling vinyl flooring for 2.5 years, which actually gives you a really good grounding on selling because I was covering the whole of the south of England. One day I'd be in with a one-man band in Brixton selling him some rolls of flooring. Next day I'd be in the largest carpet world, queuing up with other people trying to sell their wares and take your order book with you. And it taught me a lot about selling with different types of people and selling to professional buyers and selling to owners of businesses, which I then came back into the IT world in a very small distributor focused on networking products. This was before Microsoft became the big boom, and it was a company called Novell in those days. And my remit was simple from the MD: go sign me new customers, new partners. And I think after 4 months, I handed over 20 net new partners to the business that had never bought from them before, that had done a minimum of £20,000 of revenue, and eventually grew that business to being $1 million million revenue in 6 months. And I think all of that is driven by relationships. That was driven by going out, meeting people and delivering what I said I was going to deliver to them. I always remember being called into my MD's office and he read a letter of complaint about me from one of our competitors. I'm thinking, God, I'm in trouble here. To which point he turned around and slapped me on the back and said, do more of it, kick it, because I was in everybody's competitors. And that was really good. That was hard-nosed selling in those days. There was no Salesforce, or there was no LinkedIn to go and find your customers. You literally went and knocked on doors. And I've actually enjoyed doing that through my career and taking salespeople after going to visit customers and just calling into an industrial estate and asking for compliment slips with the name of their CEO, CIO, CFO, whatever you need to drive your business. So did that for a couple of years, continued doing that for another company thereafter. Then started to feel as though I was going to get into sales management. And one of my MDs approached me in the mid 80s and said, look, you like being around, people react to you, people like working with you. So started doing sales management in the late 80s, which got me going into talking to bigger organizations.
You mentioned that you felt like you were going to start getting into sales management. Is that like an intuition thing, or was that analyzing what's going on? When you say you felt that, what do you mean by that?
I enjoyed conversing with people. I enjoyed helping people. I think I've always been a team player in sport. Golf may be the exception to that, but as you get older, golf becomes important and you're playing with your mates. But if you look at playing rugby, playing football, playing cricket, any sport like that, it was a team sport. And for me, and I think it's so important in businesses today, which is sometimes maybe why lockdown doesn't help in having people working from home, having those types of scrum approaches in the office and getting people together to look at an issue, try and find resolution to issues is key. And I think you sometimes miss that. I mean, video calls are great for driving that, but there's nothing better than whiteboarding everything and getting people to contribute. And that's the other thing. Sometimes I think having video calls doesn't allow everybody to contribute to a conversation. It can get monopolized by a few rather than by many. Whereas if you're in a group environment and you can start whiteboarding and getting sticky note paper and putting them suggestions up and then debriefing on all of them and looking at people's suggestions and debating whether they're one to move forward with or park it or even bin it. And I think I found doing that and working with people and having a team approach to talking to customers, because you can't be everybody to every customer, okay? And I think the interesting thing is I do a lot of account planning sessions with sales teams. And you say part of it is role, individual, relationship owner, and account owner. And a lot of salespeople put themselves down from C-suite right the way down to purchasing. And I keep getting them, you can't control all those relationships. It's impossible, okay? You get an issue in a customer or you're trying to get a PO out of a customer and you're stuck at a level. If I've got a relationship with the CEO or the CFO or the head of purchasing, I can probably have a different conversation. And you can come back and blame me if you need to blame me in that conversation.
Exactly.
To your people. So I think it's that having the right people engaged in accounts. And I found that very early in the mid-80s that I enjoyed helping people. I was probably a senior account manager at that time, but I enjoyed helping people and finding resolution to issues. So that's what then, and I was captain of rugby and captain of cricket side. So you get that leadership and that roll the sleeves up and let's just go do it.
And so with sports, so what kind of level did you compete at? And was that early on in your life, or was that like in your 20s that you were doing that? What kind of ages were you?
I think I played a reasonable standard of rugby. Never professional, never semi-professional. Same in cricket, would have been Surrey, the top league in Surrey at the time. Rugby was London League, so so pretty good standard in London 1 and 2. But it wasn't. Standard wasn't the issue there. The thing for me was it was a team pulling together with somebody at the arrowhead of that team that they would work with and drive on with, rather than sitting back looking for someone else to do it. I've always found that I've got great ideas, but I'm also one of these people that just wants to roll their sleeves up and get on with it and lead from the front. And that my ethos has always been don't ask somebody to do what you wouldn't do yourself. I wouldn't ask somebody working for me to do something that I wouldn't feel comfortable doing. And I've kept that right the way through my career.
I love that. And the reason I was asking about the standard or the level of competition is that what I've noticed is as competition gets higher, some of those high performance behaviors become increasingly more important. I think sport at all levels helps people understand teamwork, ego, humility, how to push together. What I've noticed is as you get higher and higher in that kind of standard, the pressure is higher. The behaviors become more important. The little things become even more important. So that's why I was trying to gauge in terms of, you seem quite a competitive person. So I'm just trying to understand within sports how you did that.
You missed one key word there, and that's emotions. And I think never be scared to show your emotions. And I think I look back at some of the emotions I showed and you go, I can't believe I did that. But however, without that, people don't really get to know you. And I think it's if you just deadpan and you just focused. Look, some people thrive on that. Nick Faldo in golf thrived on that deadpan. But nobody ever really got to know the true Nick Faldo as a person. And I think he was very individual in what he did, whereas mine's always been team. And therefore, I think showing those emotions and not be frightened to let your guard down is key. And you do that. I do that in work. And I think people know where they stand with me. Yeah, it's that suffering fools gladly. I don't. And that comes from competition. You want everybody to be the best they can be. And I think it's, somebody said the other day that somebody rang them and said, I think Jeremy's going to join us and be my new boss. What advice would you give me? Give 100% every day.
Yeah.
He'll see right through. If you're not giving 100%, because he gives 100%, somebody else said, people who say they give 110%, it's impossible. You can only ever give 100%. And that's all you can give, right? So if you're giving your all and it's not working for you, he'll have your back. If you're not giving your all and it's not working for you, or even if you're giving your all and you're flying, he'll still want to know why you're not doing more. And I just think it's that whole, just take people on that journey.
And I really like what you said about emotion, because sometimes when you see the emotion from your leader, it almost pushes you to be like, oh, okay, let's step it up for him because that's our guy and this is how he's feeling. Let me respond to that. So I really liked what you said about emotion. And I agree, like giving 100% is really the main thing we can control. I can't really control the outcome. All I can control is my effort. But the more effort that I put into it, the more likely the outcome is going to be good. And I really liked that. I wanted to ask you something. You mentioned you did computer science. So what made you decide to go from computer science into sales?
I was never technical enough. I understand technology, but I'm not going to be a bits and bytes guy. The course I did was around business, computer science and business, a little bit driven by what my father was doing at the time, a little bit driven by the fact that I always knew I could talk a lot and wasn't frightened to have a conversation and meet anybody. And I just think, look, could I have gone down the technical route? Maybe. I didn't want to go down programming for sure. These were early 80s where programming was a really nightmare. It was all punch tape and everything like that. And I just felt two things. Number one, selling was where the money was, because typically in sales, the commission element of what you can earn, and if you do a good job, you can earn a good wage. It was it was meeting people, it was meeting different people. That's how I got into selling, really. And my dad was running a business at the time, an American business across Europe. And we'd have people, he'd bring people home for dinner probably 3 times a week. And I just enjoyed talking to them on what they were doing. And these were people from all around the world that would come. My mum would tear her hair out, but hey, she got used to it in the end. I just enjoyed that. Just enjoyed the conversing with people really more than anything else.
And so was your dad bringing them home as part of the sales process, or was that because he was friends with them, or what was the reason he was bringing them back home?
People that worked with him, for him. They were work colleagues that were coming over to the UK. They were coming into this little village in Wales, and instead of them being in a hotel or dad staying out with them for dinner, he'd bring them home. Not the first time he met them, obviously, once he got to know them. And what I learned from him was he was building this whole family atmosphere around his work colleagues. And I think that's where I think my ethos and my work philosophies come from.
That's amazing. You mentioned, so you started into sales management. You're starting to bring some of these things that you're talking about in terms of the culture. So continue on with your career journey.
Yeah, then moved into a proper sales management role for my first American manufacturer. But I think then I got into, in the mid-90s, I was working for a very small distributor. We were turning over 7 million. In 94, when I left in 99, we were turning over 75 million. And that was doing proper sales management and leading two different teams, an internal sales team and an external sales team, plus the sales support function around that. And you realize the first thing you do is you get to understand, and this is something I've carried on with me all the way through. I interview when I join a business, I interview everybody within that business, not because I want to know how good they are. I want to know about them. And when I interview them, I don't talk about your past experiences. What I talk about is your family. If they want to open up, someone can tell me to Foxtrot Oscar if they want, that they don't want to divulge that information. But most people do. Yeah, most people want to tell you what makes them tick as an individual outside of work. And a lot of people are family orientated, and it's their family, and they're coming to work to provide for families and to give a better life for their families. Most people love the competition of being in a work environment. A lot of people like social around work. So I get to understand the individuals that work for me. And that was in the early 90s when I learned that trait of interview people, understand what they're doing, understand their market, their home life. And if there's a problem there, they can come and talk to you about it, and just understand that where they are in their personal goals. That was the early 90s, and then was presenting to GE Capital IT Solutions in 99 about this marketplace of networking and high-end Unix platform servers and storage, which is what I was selling. And they said, okay, Big Mouth, come and do it for us, which is when I first joined big companies. And GE was the largest company in the world at the time, headed up by Jack Welch. And Jack had a slightly different approach to people, which was find the wrong ones and get rid of them early. Whereas my thoughts were, identify the wrong ones, but work with them to see if the company is failing them or whether they're failing, and then understand if the company's failing, what can we do to help them on their journey. Joined GE, who got bought by Computer Center in 2001, and ended up in a bigger business, managing a bigger team again, and then just started becoming regional VP regional VP for different US-based manufacturers of IT products, right the way through to the recent role of being CEO in a business. So that's the whole journey of dealing with people. And the interesting thing when you work as in a regional VP for international manufacturers is you have a lot of matrix management to deal with. You have a lot of language barriers to deal with and different. And I love that. People keep saying to me, you enjoy getting on a plane every week? And my answer to that was, because I'm meeting different people and working in different cultural environments and understanding how the French do deals over lunch or dinner, or the Spanish do deals over lunch, and working out how these works. And if you go to the Far East, the Middle East, a lot is done purely on shaking of a hand and trust of each other from that face-to-face interaction. You just learn a hell of a lot about the marketplace. I just loved every minute of doing that.
That's awesome. And what are some of the ways, because you mentioned about you've grown in leadership, what were some of the ways that you learned? Did you do courses? Was it from mentorship? How did you learn to grow as a leader?
A lot of it is looking at the people you'd worked for in the past and taking their best traits and understanding what worked for them, and then understanding what didn't work for them, more importantly, so that you can turn around. I worked for a guy in 2003, 2004. That was a really nasty piece of work. And I don't rule like that. I don't rule through fear. I rule through collaboration and getting everybody working, as I said earlier on. I realized quite quickly that his style of management wouldn't work for me. And if I tried to be that, I'd probably go extreme on it rather than controlled. So I taught myself I wasn't going to go that route. Okay. And he would surely be somebody that would ask people to do what he wouldn't be prepared to do and would admit it. You look at people and you look at their traits and you think, this is really good. And people will follow you on that route, or people won't follow you if you go that way. So there was that. Yeah, there was the odd course thrown in. I went to Henley Management School for a week, which I probably picked up 4 or 5 things, which I always say, if you go on a course, you pick up 4 or 5 things, you're never going to learn a whole course that you can take with you. And it was really that, in terms of making sure that you've got to be you. That's the key thing on managing people. You've got to be yourself, because if you try and be something that you're not, you'll get found out very quickly. And it's your one earlier on that you said about leading the French team. Was I putting on a brave face? No. I was being me. And I was being 100% me, and people could see that I wasn't putting anything on and I wasn't trying to pull the wool over their eyes. It was me. It was my personality, my way of doing it. And they bought into it because I firmly believed, and they believed in me.
How do you figure out who you are, if that makes sense?
I think you know that, don't you? I think anybody that says, I don't know who I am, A, has never found the right job that they enjoy doing in a work environment. I'm talking about here, right? You hear a lot of people going, oh, I still don't really know what I want to do. That frustrates me a little bit, because I think you go down a career and you either figure out very quickly that this is not a career you want to go and change as quickly as you can. Because if you don't do that, you're in it. Okay. And my traits have always been the same. Tell it as it is. And that's something else I always say to people. You ask me an honest question if I can answer you. So there's no, I'm not giving away anything here that's not in the public domain, for example. I will answer you. And if you don't like it, I'm really sorry. But you've asked me the question, so I'm going to give you the answer. So I think honesty is the first thing. And if you're honest with people and honest with yourself, you'll be fine. I think your understanding of what makes you tick, as I said earlier, people and success make me tick, and they come hand in hand. So you've got to realize you need people there to support you and help you drive that. I think ingrained in me from a child is don't let people down. And I hate it when people let you down. When people say they're going to do something and then don't, or I can see other people doing that, and it's one of integrity. And if you're going to do something, and say you're going to do it. And I think that was drilled into me as a youngster.
Where did that come from? Was that from your parents?
Yeah, I think so. It can only come from your parents. It comes from my mum and my dad. But yeah, it's everybody says, is there a role model? And I said, yeah, I wanted to aspire to be better than my dad, if that makes sense. I didn't want to be my dad. I wanted to be better. And he was successful in business, and I wanted to be better. And I wasn't the brightest kid in school, and my dad was very bright. But for me, I knew that I had common sense, and I knew where I wanted to go. So that was the driver for me. And I wanted to prove a lot of people wrong.
It sounds like you're like wired with competition and competitiveness.
Oh, I love it. Love competition. Hate losing. Absolutely hate losing. And any salesperson that sits in front of you says, oh, we lost that deal on price. No, you didn't. You lost that deal because A, you didn't know the customer. B, you didn't know the price point of the customer. And C, you weren't close enough to them that when somebody undercut you, they came back and asked you again if you want to resubmit. So I hate losing.
What I was going to ask you, was there like a pivotal moment in your career where you had a big decision to make and it could have gone one of 2 very different ways?
Oh, I've made probably 2 horrible decisions in my career that only cost me financially. It's not cost me in any other way. There was one where I set a business up within a business with funding from a guy who ran the main business, and we did it exceedingly well in 8 months, drove a business to about 500,000 of profitability in a very short period of time. And I said to me, you've done such a great job there. Will you come and run the main sales team for me? When I think had I continued down with that business, that probably could have sold for a reasonable amount of money in 3 to 5 years' time. First issue. Second one was I worked for a business.
Why did you make that decision?
It's that me wanting to get better and go from owning a business to sales director of a large business. I felt that was improving me at the time. And I learned from that, actually, that hunger and desire to be the most senior person you can be sometimes is not what you should be doing. And I think it was at the same time when I set that up, I basically told Cisco that acquired a business I was working for before I set this up, that I wasn't going to continue my employment. I wasn't as polite as that when I told them, but because it was handled very badly. Only for 5 years later to sit down with somebody from Cisco I knew and said to me, "You do realize that you lost a lot of money there?" And I went, "Never even thought about it. Why?" He said, "Work out your share options that you had, and they've split 5 times, and they were worth something like $18 million at the time." And it was like, which I didn't have because I didn't have the shares anymore. But it's sometimes that fair treatment that I didn't feel I had. Therefore, because of what I said earlier on, where integrity is everything, probably at times like that, stop being so petty and live with it and see where it goes probably would have been a great way to do it. And the same with the other business. And I actually went backwards from that business to go forwards again and realized that just seeking out that next C-level role or director role was probably not the right thing to do at that point in time. It's a point in time thing, and I think that's sometimes where it's the Welsh emotion in me sometimes comes out and makes you react in a way that you come to regret, and that's twice in my life that's happened. So they're the two that were led, and that was me led through me feeling I wasn't getting the integrity that I needed.
And I think that's a really hard balance in terms of what you said about knowing when to let some of the things go. What would you say do you have almost a way of knowing when to let things go, or is it kind of case by case? How does that work for you now from what you've learned?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because when you become CEO of business, and I'm one for getting people into a room and debating where you're going to go as a strategy, or debating whether you should go down this path or that path. And then you make a decision to go down that path, and then someone else comes in and starts trying to argue a different way after everybody's agreed. It's, guys, you're not going to win this argument. Keep your powder dry for another argument you might want to win. And I've seen that when I've worked for people, and you push the envelope as far as you can go, and then you realize you're not going to win this argument. I actually make a point of saying that now to people I work for. I'm going to shut up. I can't win this argument. You've got more stripes on your sleeve than I have. Sometimes you don't want to listen to it. Sometimes it's the right thing not to listen to it. I'm going to keep my powder dry and I'll talk to you again. I think it's intuition now of knowing when you're not going to win something. And if you do that, you save a lot of time and breath for another fight.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned about being a CEO just now. So how did you find that? And how is that different from the sales roles that you've been on?
Loved every minute of it.
Okay.
Loved every minute of taking a business through transition, because it was an owner-led business before I joined, to a management-led business, empowering people. And that is probably the hardest thing you can do in a business, is empower people when you replace a previous CEO that was the owner of the business. And I don't think any owner does it purposefully, but when you're the owner of the business, everything comes through. When it's your back pocket that's been influenced through every decision that you make and every expenditure that the company does, ultimately you want to control everything. Okay. When you're in that management team led, you want to empower people. And I think that's the hardest thing you can do in a management role, is saying to people, it's all right to make a mistake. Just if you do make a mistake, put your hand up very quickly. Tell us what you've done so that we can help you try and fix that. And I think a lot of people think that if they put their hand up and say, I've made a mistake, that you're going to fire them. And that's not what it's all about as far as I'm concerned. It's trying to help them get out of where they're at in a win-win situation, a win for them and a win for the company, because ultimately if they've made a mistake, it's going to cost you. That was probably the hardest part about it, was making sure people felt empowered for that journey. Loved the fact that it was a fast-paced marketplace. Look, we took the business from 50 odd million to 140 million in 2.5 years. And it was, I worked with a lot of great people, a lot of people that wanted to succeed, a lot of young people that wanted to succeed, wanted the guidance and help on how to do it. Acquired a business in Germany, and that was hard work, but good understanding of how to acquire somebody in a different environment. I guess the issue is when you're a CEO of a shareholder-led business or private equity-led business, you're never really in control, right? Because there's always people that you report to, but you do get a sense of you're in this, you're the one that the buck stops with you, and therefore you've got to go and deliver. And I love that feeling of responsibility. I love that feeling of people looking for you to sometimes guide them and take them to where they want to go. It's lonely. It's bloody hard work because it's lonely. And people say that it's lonely at the top, and it can be because everything falls on your shoulders. But loved every minute of it because you just, as long as you're working with really good people, it's for me, that's everything.
With what you said about it's lonely, what have you done to combat some of that loneliness? Have you been able to find other CEOs that you can be friends with, or is there anything that you've been able to do to combat that?
Yeah, I think I started to talk to a previous, I had about 3 people that I brought into the business to help guide. So one I brought in to help mentor my team, but also give me a little, every now and again, give me the opportunity to talk to them about this is what I was thinking in the marketplace. Another person was somebody who worked for me twice before in their career, who'd set up a business on looking at management teams and structures and the makeup and how to work together quite successfully, and could talk to her as a friend and her as a business advisor in other ways. I've got a really good network of people around me that are very successful CEOs in FTSE 100 businesses. Talk to them and understand what do they do that drives them in their business. And I think you talk to those guys, but you also find a couple of people around you in the work environment that you can sit down and have a beer with or a coffee with and just bounce ideas around of, should we do this? Should we do that? I think I said earlier on, I love getting a team together to talk about which way we're going, which we did when we talked about strategic direction. Got everybody in a room for 2 days and basically whiteboarded what's working, what's not working, where do we want to go, where do we not want to go, and from that you come up with a whole strategy for the next 3 years. So yeah, you've got to have key people within the business you can talk to. And you've also not got to be frightened to talk to your chairman or your shareholder, because it's better they understand what's going on up front rather than waiting for the next board meeting to discuss something. Sometimes you can't, but often you should.
Did that ever backfire on you in terms of talking to some people, whether it's within the organization or said the chairman and the shareholders? Did that ever backfire on you where you might have picked the wrong person?
Yeah, probably in the early 2000s, it backfired on me once when I then found out that my CFO and a sales director had conspired behind my back to get me removed from the business, and they felt they could do a better job. And that was 2 people who I'd brought into the business at the time who went to my boss, that was the group CEO, which was the person I explained earlier was not the nicest person in the world. And when we agreed to part company, actually, I was offered to go and do something else within the group, which I didn't do. One of them admitted that they knew what was going on and they'd been confiding with my boss at the time behind my back. And obviously I was talking to them the challenges and everything else, and they were spinning that out the other way. Yeah, so that once it's backfired on me. A couple of other times, but that comes back to this honest approach. Another occasion where I sat next to somebody at dinner that shouldn't have been in there, but was in the Netherlands region at the same time, a salesperson, and got invited to dinner. And they were asking me questions, and I answered them honestly, didn't think anything of it, which came back and led to a conversation with my boss at the time about trust of them. And I said, someone's spinning something exactly the wrong way. And we talked through it, and it was absolutely fine. But it was, I think some people can't take that and digest that information you've given them and come out with where you're trying to take them. They come out with a negative view, and then portray that. So, yeah, that's going to happen. If you're an open book and an honest communicator, you're going to get that left, right, and centre. So you just got to be thick-skinned.
But it sounds like 2 times. Yeah, 2 times in 30 plus years is not. That's a pretty low rate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. Because you tend to. And I always say to people, if I'm having a go at you or I'm joking with you in a large environment, it's because I like you. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't joke with you, because it would have a different consequence if I ever had to fire you. So I always say that to people. This is a two-way street. Come back at me if you want to come back at me.
Just as we round up, what would you say to the version of yourself at the beginning? You've just finished university. What conversation would you have with the younger version of yourself?
Stop trying to be a CEO from day one. And what do I mean by that? If you look, especially in the IT industry, people move around a lot in the IT industry. I think somebody said to me the other day, 2 to 3 years is an average for a salesperson in a business. And if I look around and talk to friends of mine that are in different industry sectors, they look at the IT industry going, geez, especially guys that are in FMG or something like that, and they'll go, I joined Procter & Gamble, and I've been there for 30 years, and I'm now at a C-suite position or whatever. And you think, actually, had I stuck with a few of the businesses that I moved on to try and grow, now I don't regret one of them at all, by the way, but I just think, looking back, that had I stayed with 1 or 2 of those businesses for another 3-4 years, probably I'd have got to where I got to 2 years later. I'd have got to it 2 years later than I got to that position, but I'd have been in a much better position to go further again within that business and not have to keep moving around to try and elevate yourself. And I think anybody coming in now, and I would say to myself, looking back, stick with things a little bit longer, try and work things out. And where I've stayed with businesses is because I've had a fresh challenge every 2 years. So, for example, at Polycom, they gave me another region to go and look after and keep growing yourself, which keeps your interest. Some businesses are not good at doing that at all. Some are brilliant at doing it. And I think it's having that patience. Patience is the biggest word I'd use there, actually.
That's so interesting. I think because, so for me, I worked at the same company for 12 years, right? And so it's quite interesting for me because one thing I've noticed is that so I was in data, and people do move every kind of 2-3 years, but by being there for 5 years or 6 years or 12 years, you have so much company knowledge as well that helps in some of those big situations. Your network is quite deep. So, some of the people that I started with were now directors or MDs or whatever it is. So we still have that relationship. So it's a really interesting one, but I worked for a company that progressed me every 2 to 3 years, that gave me new challenges every 2 to 3 years. And like I said, not every company does that. So it's this really weird balance of there is definitely benefits to being somewhere for a long time. I feel like also some people don't get that progression that they would want in that period of time. So it's a really interesting balance.
But also, and I think this is an interesting one. When I joined Avaya, 2000 and whatever it was now, and I had a guy working for me who'd been there 22 years. He'd started with whoever it was, Lucent Technologies in the early days. And he was coming up to 40, so he'd been there almost all of his working life. And he said, I'm leaving. So I said, okay. And you go through the whys, and he explains the whys. And I said, okay, do me a favor. Do not call me asking for your job back in the next 12 months. And he looked at me and I said, because you will. And because exactly what you just said, Tolo, in terms of he understood Avaya and how the inner workings of Avaya worked, understand how to get things done, progressed, who he could go to sort issues out. You move on and you've lost all that knowledge. And I just said to him, just don't do it. He rang me in 3 months and said, could I have my job back? I said, remember the conversation? And he went, oh yeah, forgot about that. Do 1 year. He rang me after a year. He said, sorry, you're absolutely right. I love it where I am now. It's not that I didn't want him back. I'd have taken him back straight away, but I knew he'd be making a mistake coming back for the reasons he left in the first place. And I think that's true in a lot of people that do that. If you're going to do something, you stick with it and you just keep progressing, and you'll understand the business, and that's what the business will buy into you for as well.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Jeremy, thank you so much
No,
for
thank you.
being on the podcast, for your time. It's been really insightful. I've really loved our conversation. So thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it. Some great questions and enjoyed the time we spent. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the episode. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to spend some time with us to hear about the journeys of sales leaders and learn how you can become a better leader at what you do.
Absolutely. There's a huge amount of value in listening to someone else's story. And what we're really aiming to do with every one of these episodes is introduce you to someone that you might never have met, but that's got some great lessons as part of their own journey that you can take an inspiration from. And whether that's things that you've liked that you want to try and replicate, big decisions that they've taken that give you a bit of courage to go and take that leap yourself, or maybe some things that they've learned the hard way that you can avoid to basically find your own path a bit faster with some of the less messy stuff in between. So we really appreciate your time. We do this every week with a different leader within technology. So please go back and have a look through some of the other conversations that we've had to find other people that might inspire you that you can bring into your own network as virtual mentors. And also, every week we release this. So if you want to be the first person to listen and meet your new mentor, hit the subscribe button and then you'll get a notification every time that podcast gets released. So thank you so much for your time. We'll see you on the next pod.